Nothing beats a good old-fashioned meal from your grandmother. The smell of her kitchen always made me smile as a kid, and it's probably the same for you. Even though we did not have a lot to spend, Grandma always made sure we ate the best food. So in this video, we will discuss her budget-friendly recipes for 1 hour long. Buckle up and enjoy all the good food memories. Let's begin with bread pudding, a classic comfort food with roots that trace back to times when wasting food was simply not an option. During the Great Depression, bread pudding became a go-to dish, often prepared with stale bread that would otherwise go to waste. By adding simple ingredients like milk, eggs, and sugar, one could transform leftover bread into a sumptuous meal. Traditionally, bread pudding is made by soaking chunks of stale bread in a sweet custard mixture, then baking it into a soft, aromatic meal. It was a very flexible recipe, relying on basic ingredients that were readily available to most households at the time. Ingredients like raisins, cinnamon, and vanilla could be added for extra flavor, though many families during that era simply made do with the basics. What makes bread pudding particularly special is how it's so versatile. You can make it with almost any type of bread, white bread, whole wheat, or even leftover rolls. And while the Depression-era version might have been simpler, modern variations can include anything from caramelized apples to chocolate chips, making it a beloved dessert that has stood the test of time. While bread pudding has evolved over the years, its core remains the same: a humble, hearty dessert. Would you be trying this recipe with the leftover bread in your fridge? Talking about delicacies you could make from leftover treats, very few came close to the level of our next treat. Next up is baked beans. This is one of those dishes that have stood the test of time, evolving into an American staple that many associate with comfort and tradition. This simple, hearty dish was made by slowly cooking beans with a mixture of molasses, brown sugar, and salt pork or bacon. It was a filling, affordable meal that could stretch for days, making it ideal for families struggling to make ends meet. Beans themselves have been an essential food in many cultures for centuries, prized for their ability to grow easily and in large quantities. They're rich in proteins and nutrients, making them an excellent food source. During the Depression, families turned to beans as a cost-effective way to feed large groups without breaking the bank. The classic recipe for baked beans includes white beans, often navy beans, which were soaked overnight, then cooked slowly with sweeteners like molasses and sugar, and sometimes flavored with bits of bacon or salt pork. The slow cooking process, often done in a cast-iron pot, allowed the beans to absorb all the sweet and smoky flavors, creating a dish that was both satisfying and nourishing. For many, baked beans were not just a dinner dish, they were often served with cornbread for an even more filling meal. On Sundays, when families might have had a little more time and resources to prepare a big meal, baked beans could be the centerpiece of a comforting, low-cost feast. The dish could also be made in large batches, making it easy to stretch leftovers throughout the week. Though baked beans were traditionally associated with New England, they became a comfort food across the United States during the Depression, especially in households looking to feed multiple mouths on a tight budget. As canned beans became more widely available, baked beans became an even more convenient option, and the recipe underwent various regional adaptations. Some areas swapped molasses for brown sugar, while others added mustard or tomato paste for a twist. Today, baked beans are often served at barbecues, picnics, and as a side dish to a variety of meals. You should try serving it at your next event. Talking about a treat that'll definitely go well with your next potluck. Family and friends won't be able to resist this next recipe: depression cake. Moving on, let's discuss one of the most innovative recipes developed during those dark times named depression cake. Often referred to as wacky cake or crazy cake, this cake was a way to make a sweet treat without the luxury of ingredients that were scarce and expensive during the Great Depression. Made without butter, eggs, or milk, essentials in most cake recipes, this cake was born out of necessity, but turned into a beloved dessert over the years. The basic recipe for depression cake is quite simple: flour, sugar, cocoa powder, baking soda, vinegar, vegetable oil, and water. That's it. No eggs, no butter, just basic pantry items that were inexpensive and easy to come by. The combination of ingredients might sound unusual, but the result is a surprisingly moist, chocolatey cake that was perfect for families needing a bit of sweetness to brighten their day. Though depression cake was originally made in a larger 9 by 13-inch pan, the recipe has been easily adapted to make cupcakes or even layered cakes. Over the years, bakers have added their own twists, sometimes frosting the cake with a simple glaze, or by incorporating different flavors like cinnamon or vanilla to give it a personal touch. Today, depression cake remains a nostalgic favorite, especially for those who lived through that era. Perhaps you're out of eggs and butter and you are craving some homemade cake. You can always give this a shot. You know what else you need to give a shot? This next amazing treat, rice and raisins. The next meal may seem like an unusual pairing, but tastes absolutely divine: rice and raisins. It's a simple, inexpensive dessert that combines two household ingredients, rice and raisins, into a filling treat. Often served as a pudding, this dish was a practical way to stretch a small amount of food into a meal that could feed several people. The ingredients were basic and inexpensive: rice, sugar, water, milk, and raisins. In some variations, spices like cinnamon or nutmeg were added for flavor. Rice and raisins was typically cooked by simmering the rice in water until tender, then combining it with milk, sugar, and raisins, and letting it cook slowly until it thickened into a creamy pudding. The raisins would soften and plump up as they absorbed the flavors, adding a touch of sweetness to each spoonful. The result was a dish that was both nourishing and satisfying, a perfect comfort food. Rice and raisins wasn't just a dessert. It could also serve as a hearty breakfast or even a side dish. Its versatility made it a go-to for frugal families, and it was a dish that could be enjoyed by people of all ages. In a time when food had to stretch, dishes like this showed just how creative families could get, transforming simple ingredients into something special. As times changed and more ingredients became widely available, rice and raisins faded from many family tables. However, the dish still holds a place in the hearts of those who grew up with it during the Depression, almost like a plaque of survival. Much like rice and raisins, our next dish was pretty up there when it came to survival food: hot water cornbread. Hot water cornbread is a simple yet flavorful dish that became a staple during the Great Depression, offering a practical solution to scarce ingredients. Made from just cornmeal, boiling water, and a pinch of salt, this bread was both affordable and satisfying. Unlike traditional cornbread, which requires baking, hot water cornbread is made by mixing cornmeal with hot water to form a dough. The dough is shaped into small patties and fried until golden brown, resulting in a crispy exterior and a soft, warm interior. This quick, easy recipe didn't require any eggs, milk, or baking powder, making it an ideal choice during times of limited resources. During the Depression, when families needed to make do with what they had, hot water cornbread became a reliable side dish, often paired with beans, greens, or stews. The bread absorbed the savory juices from the meal, adding flavor and texture. Its simplicity made it an affordable option for feeding families, and its crispy golden crust provided a comforting contrast to the soft inside. Over time, various regional adaptations appeared, with some adding sugar for sweetness or herbs for extra flavor, but the core recipe remained unchanged. Though hot water cornbread's popularity has faded, it still holds a cherished place in Southern kitchens today. Our next Depression-era treat was the epitome of comfort food: bacon and onion sandwich. The bacon and onion sandwich became a popular meal during the Great Depression due to its simplicity and affordability. Made with just a few ingredients, bacon, onions, and bread, it provided a satisfying meal. While bacon was a rare treat during that time, households used it sparingly, stretching it by pairing it with sweet caramelized onions. The onions helped balance the salty richness of the bacon, making the sandwich both flavorful and filling. This sandwich was a quick and easy option for lunch or dinner. The savory bacon and the sweetness of the slow-cooked onions combined perfectly, creating a comforting dish. Toasted on a griddle, the sandwich had a crunchy texture that added to its appeal. Despite the economic struggles of the era, meals like this offered a taste of indulgence, made with what little was available. bacon and onion sandwich faded as the economy improved and bacon became more accessible. However, it's still a fun and creative way to make use of whatever is left of your bacon dot. Talking about creatively made food, it didn't get much better than this next dish. Fried potato skins. Fried potato skins were a perfect example of the waste not, want not mentality that shaped cooking during the Great Depression. When resources were scarce, families made use of every part of the potato, including the skins. Potatoes were affordable and versatile, and by frying the peels in oil, a potential waste product turned into a crispy, flavorful snack or side dish. To prepare fried potato skins, leftover peels were cleaned and fried until golden and crispy. Seasoned with salt or whatever spices were available, they became a tasty and satisfying treat. Often served alongside other meals, the skins added a crunchy texture and savory taste to the dish, making them an excellent accompaniment. Though simple, fried potato skins highlighted the ingenuity of Depression-era cooks. Over time, as the economy improved, the dish evolved with added toppings like cheese and sour cream. It would make the perfect snack for a long afternoon right before dinner. But if you were looking for a heartier dish, you'd definitely have loved our next dish, slumgullion. Slumgullion, a hearty and flexible stew, was a dish born out of necessity during the Great Depression. The word is believed to have originated in the mid-19th century, possibly from miners or sailors. Slum referred to a slushy or muddy substance, and gullion may have been slang for refuse or offal. It was a throw-everything-in-the-pot kind of meal, where families combined whatever ingredients they had, scraps of meat, vegetables, and even canned goods, to create a filling and affordable stew. Its origins go back to miners and pioneers, but it became a permanent fixture during tough times when food supplies were limited. There was no set recipe for slumgullion, and it varied from home to home. Some versions used ground beef or pork for the base, while others relied on potatoes, carrots, onions, or canned tomatoes for flavor and substance. The beauty of the dish was in its versatility. It was a one-pot meal that could feed a family for several days, making it a practical choice for resourceful cooks. Though its name sounds odd, slumgullion became a symbol of survival and comfort during the Depression. Simple and affordable, it provided a satisfying meal when money was tight. People who grew up with slumgullion often remember it not for its gourmet qualities, but for the comfort it provided to them during those dark times. Similarly, the amazing taste of this next treat was a bright spot in those dark times. Molasses cookies. Molasses cookies were a sweet comfort during the Great Depression, offering a rare treat which was not common then. Unlike more elaborate desserts that required expensive ingredients, these cookies were made with molasses, a cheaper sweetener that nearly everyone could afford. Molasses not only made the cookies affordable, but also gave them their rich, deep flavor and chewy texture. The recipe for molasses cookies was simple and used pantry basics like flour, molasses, baking soda, and spices such as ginger or cinnamon. The dough was easy to mix, and the cookies baked into soft, flavorful treats. They were often made in large batches, allowing families to enjoy an inexpensive yet satisfying dessert for weeks. Molasses cookies were a small luxury, especially for children during the Depression. Molasses was not only a cost-effective sweetener, but also packed with nutrients like iron, making the cookies somewhat nutritious as well. Even as times improved, these cookies faded, but it's still a fond memory for those who lived in those times. Our next staple wasn't just a dish whipped up to weather the Depression, it was also pretty good comfort food. Potato and onion pie. Potato and onion pie was another humble yet hearty dish that families relied on during the Great Depression. Potatoes, being inexpensive and easy to grow, were often the cornerstone of many meals, and this pie was a great way to combine them with the few other ingredients people had at their disposal. Onions added flavor and depth, making the dish filling and satisfying. The pie was usually made with a simple crust, sometimes just flour and water, and layered with thinly sliced potatoes and onions. Seasonings were often minimal, just salt and pepper, but some households managed to add butter or lard to enhance the flavor. Once assembled, the pie was baked until the crust was golden brown and the potatoes and onions were tender. In some versions, milk or cream was poured over the filling to add a little richness. But even without these extras, the dish was both comforting and nourishing. What made potato and onion pie so popular was its ability to stretch basic ingredients into a meal that could feed the whole family. It could be served as a main dish or as a side, and leftovers were just as good the next day, if not better. In an era where making every bit of food count was crucial, this pie was a creative solution to make simple ingredients feel a bit more special. Talking about special, our next treat took an unusual approach to creating a delicacy: eggless pancakes. Eggless pancakes were a clever solution to the scarcity of ingredients like eggs and butter during the Great Depression. With basic ingredients like flour, baking powder, milk, and a little sugar, families could whip up a batch of these pancakes without missing the eggs that were often hard to come by or too expensive. The absence of eggs didn't diminish their appeal, as these pancakes were still fluffy and satisfying, especially when paired with syrup or a simple spread of butter. The process for making eggless pancakes was straightforward. Dry ingredients like flour, baking powder, and salt were combined with milk or even water in the leanest times to form a batter. Some families would add a bit of sugar or vanilla extract for extra flavor, but even the plain version was a treat for many. Cooked on a hot griddle until golden brown, these pancakes were a quick, economical breakfast that could feed the whole family. What made eggless pancakes special wasn't just the ease of preparation, but their adaptability. You could add whatever was on hand, sliced bananas, berries, or even leftover jam, to make them more filling or give them a sweet kick. Despite their simplicity, they became a much-loved breakfast option in homes across the country. You've run out of eggs? Not to worry. You could still eat those pancakes you were craving. You definitely needed eggs for this next treat, though: egg drop soup. Egg drop soup was a simple, nourishing dish that many families turned to during the Great Depression when they needed to stretch their ingredients as far as possible. This comforting soup was made with a basic broth, often just water flavored with whatever seasonings or vegetables were available, and a few eggs. By whisking the eggs and slowly pouring them into the simmering broth, they formed delicate, soft ribbons that gave the soup its signature texture. This dish was incredibly versatile and could be adapted to whatever ingredients were on hand. Sometimes families would add onions, garlic, or even leftover vegetables to the broth to give it more flavor and substance. In its simplest form, egg drop soup was a light, protein-rich meal that could be made quickly and affordably. Despite its modest ingredients, egg drop soup was satisfying and warm, making it a popular choice for families looking to make the most of what little they had. It could be served as a starter or as the main meal when paired with a slice of bread or some rice. One thing egg drop soup had in common with our next dish was just how they would always give you more than your money's worth: scrapple. Scrapple, a breakfast dish with origins from Pennsylvania Dutch cuisine, is a type of pork-based loaf made from pork scraps, cornmeal, flour, and spices. After the mixture is boiled, it is shaped into a loaf, cooled, and then sliced and fried until crispy. While not exclusive to Pennsylvania, scrapple became particularly popular in the Midwestern region of the U.S., where it was a common breakfast item in homes and diners alike. Scrapple was originally created as a way to use every part of the hog, particularly the less desirable cuts, making it an economical choice for families. Its rich, savory flavor made it a popular pairing with eggs and toast, or served with a drizzle of maple syrup for a sweet and savory contrast. Despite its humble ingredients, scrapple gained a loyal following thanks to its hearty, satisfying texture and taste. However, as breakfast habits shifted toward lighter, more health-conscious fare, scrapple's reputation as a pork scraps dish contributed to its decline in popularity outside of its home region. For many, the idea of eating a loaf made from various parts of the pig became unappealing, especially as breakfast meats like bacon and sausage rose to prominence. If a meaty dish like scrapple was a bit too out there for you, our next dish was more of the usual fare: Johnny cakes. Johnny cakes, a traditional American breakfast food with origins dating back to the early colonial days, are thin, cornmeal-based pancakes that were a staple in the diets of early settlers. Made from simple ingredients: cornmeal, salt, water, and sometimes milk or sugar. Johnny cakes were easy to prepare and could be cooked on a griddle or over an open flame. They were especially popular in the New England and Mid-Atlantic regions, where corn was a dietary staple. Johnny cakes were a versatile breakfast option, often served with butter, syrup, or honey, or used as a side to accompany meats like ham or bacon. Their crisp edges and soft interior made them a satisfying meal, especially when paired with coffee or tea. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, they were a common sight at breakfast tables, particularly in rural communities where cornmeal was readily available. As time went on and more modern breakfast options became available, Johnny cakes fell out of favor, particularly as wheat-based pancakes and waffles rose in popularity. The humble Johnny cake, once a symbol of early American resilience and resourcefulness, is now largely forgotten, except in certain regional pockets where tradition still holds strong. The simplicity of Johnny cakes brings to mind our next Depression-era staple, a once popular breakfast item no one sadly starts their day with anymore: biscuits and gravy. Biscuits and gravy was a staple comfort food that provided a hearty and filling meal during the Great Depression. This dish, deeply rooted in Southern cuisine, was a way to stretch simple ingredients into something that felt more substantial. The biscuits were made from basic ingredients like flour, baking powder, and a bit of fat, often lard or shortening, which many families had on hand. Even in lean times, making biscuits was relatively affordable, and they could be baked in large batches to last several meals. The gravy, on the other hand, was typically made from meat drippings or fat, thickened with flour and seasoned with salt and pepper. In households where meat was scarce, even a small amount of fat could be turned into a savory, creamy gravy. Sometimes, families would add a bit of milk or water to the gravy to make it go further. Sausage gravy was a more luxurious version, but in many cases, the gravy consisted simply of what little fat and flour could be spared. The beauty of biscuits and gravy lay in its simplicity and its ability to stretch small amounts of food into something filling. The biscuits themselves were soft and fluffy, while the gravy added a rich, comforting element that made even a modest meal feel satisfying. This dish was often eaten for breakfast, but it was hearty enough to be served at any time of day. The most important thing about it was that, just like our next dish, it easily fed the entire family on a tight budget. Potato pancakes. Potato pancakes, often referred to as latkes in Jewish culture or simply as potato cakes, were a beloved dish during the Great Depression due to their affordability and versatility. Potatoes were a staple ingredient in many households because they were inexpensive, filling, and could be stored for long periods. When money was tight, potatoes were one of the few vegetables that families could rely on to feed everyone. To make potato pancakes, grated potatoes were combined with ingredients like flour, salt, and sometimes an egg to help bind the mixture together. The pancakes were then fried in hot oil or fat until golden brown and crispy on the outside, yet soft and tender on the inside. While the basic recipe didn't require much, families would often add whatever seasonings or extra ingredients they had on hand, such as onions, garlic, or herbs, to give the pancakes more flavor. In some cases, a bit of leftover meat or vegetables could be added to the mix. Potato pancakes were incredibly versatile. They could be served as a side dish with a main meal, or as a hearty breakfast when paired with a dollop of sour cream or applesauce. In times when meat was scarce or unaffordable, potato pancakes were a great way to fill up without breaking the budget. And since they were easy to make in large batches, they could feed a family for several meals, making them an economical choice during the Depression. Our next treat was also a hell of an economical choice for those trying times: oatmeal meatloaf. Oatmeal meatloaf became a permanent fixture during the Great Depression due to its practicality and ability to stretch limited resources. With meat, particularly beef, being expensive, oatmeal served as an affordable filler, helping to bulk up the dish and make it go further. This budget-friendly meal was both hearty and satisfying, making it an ideal option for large families. The recipe for oatmeal meatloaf combined ground meat, typically a mix of beef and pork, with oats, eggs, if available, onions, and simple seasonings. The oats provided texture and helped bind the meat together. The loaf was often topped with ketchup or tomato sauce, adding a sweet and tangy finishing to the dish. The seasonings were minimal, usually just salt, pepper, and sometimes garlic or herbs. Families could adapt the recipe based on what they had in the pantry, incorporating leftovers like rice, breadcrumbs, or vegetables. This flexibility made it a great way to reduce food waste while providing a filling, nutritious meal that could be enjoyed over several days. Our next dish didn't keep as well, but it was just as great a comfort dish: potato soup. Potato soup was a simple yet comforting dish. Potatoes, being inexpensive and versatile, formed the foundation of this hearty meal. The basic recipe called for potatoes, water, salt, and pepper, with the possibility of adding other ingredients like onions, garlic, and milk or butter when available. What made potato soup so beloved was its simplicity and adaptability. Families could stretch the soup by adding whatever vegetables they had on hand, such as carrots, celery, or even leftover greens. Some variations included bits of bacon or ham bones for extra flavor, though meat was often a luxury. The potatoes cooked down to create a creamy base, thickening the soup without the need for thickeners like cream or flour. It could be improved by adding beans, rice, or extra vegetables, and richer by stirring in milk or cream when the budget allowed. Even in its most basic form, potato soup was cherished for its ability to feed a family without breaking the bank, making it a reliable, satisfying meal. Once you get past the unusual name of our next dish, you get to discover one of the most flavorful dishes of that era: stone soup. Stone soup is a legendary dish. Its origin tale centers on a traveler who arrives in a village with nothing but a stone and an empty pot. As the traveler heats the pot, he convinces the villagers that he can make a hearty soup from the stone, prompting them to each contribute small portions of vegetables, meat, or seasonings. By the end, the pot is full of a rich, flavorful soup. In practice, stone soup was a Depression-era dish that relied on whatever ingredients were available, often starting with just water or a broth, and then gradually adding whatever vegetables, scraps, or leftover meat could be spared. Common ingredients included carrots, potatoes, onions, and beans, items that were often on hand in many households. While the stone itself was more symbolic than culinary, the idea of using minimal ingredients to create a filling meal resonated deeply with families struggling to make do with what little they had. Stone soup faded with time as the economy grew into better times. It is a meal you'll hardly find on families' tables today. Perhaps you're feeling famished with very little money to spare. You could try out this very simple meal: cornmeal mush. Cornmeal mush was a simple and filling dish that became a reliable comfort food, especially for rural families. Made from cornmeal, an inexpensive and widely available ingredient, it was a go-to meal that didn't require many other resources. To prepare cornmeal mush, the cornmeal was slowly stirred into boiling water or milk and cooked until it thickened into a creamy, porridge-like consistency. The dish was often seasoned with salt, butter, or sugar, depending on whether it was intended as a savory or sweet meal. The beauty of cornmeal mush lies in its versatility and simplicity. It could be served hot or cold, and sometimes leftovers were sliced and fried into crispy pieces, offering a different texture. Whether eaten as breakfast, lunch, or dinner, cornmeal mush was easy to prepare and could be adapted to suit whatever ingredients were available. A drizzle of molasses, sugar, or syrup could sweeten it, while savory options like bacon or fried eggs could make it more hearty. For families facing the hardships of the Depression, cornmeal mush provided an affordable and dependable meal. Mulligan stew.
I'm Mike. I'm Manny.
And I'm Mulligan. And we're Mulligan Stew! Yeah!
What better way to start than with the Mulligan stew? Mulligan stew emerged as a resourceful solution during the economic hardships of the 1980s. Physically, Mulligan stew is a thick, chunky concoction with a rich, savory broth. Its appearance varies depending on the ingredients available, but it typically includes a medley of vegetables and whatever meat could be procured. The taste is comforting and robust, with flavors melding together to create a satisfying meal. Its popularity stemmed from its ability to feed many mouths with minimal ingredients, making it a staple in struggling households. This hearty dish got its name from the Irish-American practice of mulligan, which meant gathering leftover ingredients for a communal meal. The stew's origins can be traced back to hobo camps during the late 19th century, but it gained prominence in American households during the recession when families needed to stretch their limited resources. To make mulligan stew, one needs a combination of vegetables such as potatoes, carrots, and onions, any available meat, often scraps or inexpensive cuts, and a flavorful broth. The recipe recipe is simple. Brown the meat, add vegetables and broth, and simmer until everything is tender. This adaptable dish allowed families to use whatever ingredients they had on hand, making it a symbol of resilience during tough times. Moving on, our next recession-era recipe features another inventive way through which people made use of nature's free offerings to put food on the table: dandelion soup.
I'm making lentil and dandelion soup.
With dandelion soup, we have a prime example of resourcefulness during the recession, transforming a common weed into a nourishing meal. This humble dish gained popularity in the 1980s when many Americans, facing severe economic hardship, turned to foraging to supplement their diets. The soup's name comes from its star ingredient, the dandelion, which grows abundantly in fields and lawns across the country. The soup's popularity during the recession era stemmed from its cost-effectiveness and the widespread availability of dandelions. These hardy plants are rich in vitamins A, C, and K, as well as iron and calcium, making them a valuable food source during times of scarcity. To prepare dandelion soup, one needs young dandelion greens, onions, potatoes, and basic seasonings. The greens are washed thoroughly, then simmered with the other ingredients in water or broth until tender. Next, let's explore a dessert that made use of a special ingredient that was just readily available enough for it to really catch on: prune pudding.
Prunes into an exceptionally spiced, sweet, and delicious prune pudding.
Prune pudding was a dessert that found its way into many tables during the recession, and it exemplifies the ingenuity of home cooks in times of scarcity. This sweet treat gained prominence in American households during the 1980s when fresh fruits were often too expensive or unavailable. The dish's name straightforwardly describes its main ingredient, prunes, which are dried plums. In appearance, prune pudding is a dark, rich-looking dessert with a smooth, custard-like consistency. Its deep purple-brown color comes from the prunes themselves. Texturally, it's creamy and thick, often garnished with a sprinkle of cinnamon or a dollop of whipped cream when available. The taste is surprisingly complex, offering a balance of sweetness from the prunes and any added sugar, with subtle caramel notes and a hint of tartness. The popularity of prune pudding during the recession era can be attributed to several factors. Prunes were relatively inexpensive, had a long shelf life, and were known for their nutritional benefits, including high fiber content and natural sweetness. This made them an ideal ingredient for families looking to create satisfying desserts on a tight budget. To make prune pudding, one needs prunes, milk, sugar, cornstarch, and basic flavorings like vanilla or cinnamon. The prunes are typically stewed until soft, then pureed and combined with a thickened milk mixture to create a pudding-like consistency. This simple yet comforting dessert provided a touch of sweetness during challenging times. When it comes to taking common ingredients and transforming them into a taste bud tingling meal, the prune pudding did it good, but our next meal did it way better. Potato pancakes.
I'm with potato pancakes, one of my favorite potato preparations.
The potato pancakes, a versatile and filling dish, dominated dining tables in many American households during the recession of the 1980s. While variations of this dish exist in many cultures, its popularity surged in the United States when potatoes emerged as an affordable and readily available food source. The name potato pancake aptly describes the flat, round shape of the dish, resembling a traditional breakfast pancake but made primarily from potatoes. The popularity of potato pancakes during the recession era stemmed from their ability to transform a humble ingredient into a satisfying meal. Potatoes were inexpensive, filled empty stomachs, and provided necessary calories and nutrients. Additionally, the simple preparation method made them accessible to even novice cooks. To make potato pancakes, one needs potatoes, onions if available, flour, eggs, and salt. The potatoes are grated, mixed with the other ingredients, and then fried in small amounts of oil or fat until crispy. This economical dish could be served for any meal of the day, often accompanied by applesauce or sour cream when available. Potato pancakes were a very popular dish loved by many, but the next dish on our list was even more popular: cabbage and dumplings.
Have you tried homemade dumplings before?
Cabbage and dumplings is a hearty and economical dish that rose to prominence in American kitchens during the challenging years of the recession. This filling meal, with roots in Eastern European cuisine, gained popularity in the 1980s as families sought ways to stretch their limited food budgets. The name of the dish straightforwardly describes its two main components: cabbage, a cheap and readily available vegetable, and dumplings, simple balls of dough that helped bulk up the meal. Cabbage and dumplings presents as a comforting, rustic dish. The cabbage cabbage, typically shredded and cooked until tender, forms a base of soft, pale green leaves. Nestled among the cabbage are plump, white dumplings, their rounded shapes providing a pleasing contrast to the vegetable's texture. The overall appearance is that of a humble yet inviting meal, often garnished with a sprinkle of black pepper or paprika for added visual appeal. The taste of cabbage and dumplings is mild and comforting. The cabbage offers a slightly sweet, earthy flavor, while the dumplings provide a neutral, starchy complement. Often seasoned with onions and basic spices, the dish's simplicity allows the natural flavors of its ingredients to shine through. Its popularity during the recession stemmed from its ability to fill empty stomachs with readily available, inexpensive ingredients. To prepare cabbage and dumplings, one needs cabbage, flour, eggs, milk or water, and basic seasonings. The cabbage is cooked until tender, while the dumpling dough is mixed and dropped into the pot to cook alongside the vegetable. This one-pot meal exemplified the resourcefulness of recession-era cooks in creating satisfying dishes from minimal ingredients. Cabbage and dumplings wasn't the only meal to sustain families in that time, though. In fact, our next meal was even more suitable for whatever sustenance was needed: bean soup.
So today, that is exactly what we're doing. We're making a very simple Spanish bean soup. This dish is filled with so many beautiful flavors.
Bean soup, a timeless comfort food, became a cornerstone of American cuisine during the recession. This hearty dish, with its origins dating back centuries, gained newfound importance as families sought affordable, nutritious meals during economic hardship. The name bean soup straightforwardly describes its primary ingredient, reflecting the simplicity and honesty of recession-era cooking. Its popularity during the recession stemmed from several factors. Beans were inexpensive, protein-rich, and had a long shelf life, making them an ideal staple for struggling families. To make bean soup, one needs dried beans, water or broth, and basic seasonings like onions, garlic, and salt. Optional additions might include carrots, celery, or ham bones for extra flavor. The beans are typically soaked overnight, then simmered with the other ingredients until tender and flavorful. This filling soup could often feed a family for several meals, stretching limited resources during tough times. This meal might be a simple one, but our next meal is a dessert that mimicked luxury quite effectively, and using readily available ingredients too: mock apple pie.
This recipe, and it is mock apple pie, and it uses Ritz crackers as a substitute for apples to make an apple pie.
Mock apple pie's grand debut was one of an ingenious creation born out of necessity during the recession, and it came to perfectly exemplify the resourcefulness of 1980s home cooks. This clever dessert gained prominence when apples became scarce or too expensive for many families. The name mock apple pie aptly describes its purpose: to mimic the taste and texture of apple pie without using any apples. Instead, it relies on an unexpected ingredient, crackers, to create a surprisingly convincing substitute. Looking at it, mock apple pie closely resembles its fruity counterpart. When sliced, it reveals a golden brown crust filled with a thick, slightly translucent filling studded with pieces of softened crackers. To the unsuspecting eye, these pieces could easily be mistaken for cooked apple slices. The top crust is often latticed or decorated with cutouts, just like a traditional apple pie, adding to the illusion. The taste of mock apple pie is remarkably similar to real apple pie, a testament to the ingenuity of its creators. The filling offers a sweet, slightly tart flavor reminiscent of cooked apples, with notes of cinnamon and lemon. The texture is soft and yielding, much like baked fruit. Its popularity during the recession stemmed from its ability to provide a taste of normalcy and comfort during challenging times, using affordable, shelf-stable ingredients. To make mock apple pie, one needs Ritz crackers or a similar substitute: sugar, cream of tartar, lemon juice, cinnamon, and pie crust. The crackers are layered in the crust and covered with a syrup made from the other ingredients, then baked until golden. This clever dessert allowed families to enjoy a semblance of luxury when real apples were out of reach. The mock apple pie might be clever, but our next entry takes being clever to the next level by stretching minimal ingredients to feed many mouths superbly. Hoover stew.
We're going to be going to the Depression era, it's around the 1930s, to make Hoover stew.
Hoover stew had a long run as a budget-friendly meal that first gained notoriety during the Great Depression, embodying the resourcefulness of Americans facing economic hardship both then and in the 1980s. This humble dish became a symbol of the era's frugality and necessity-driven creativity. The taste of Hoover stew is surprisingly satisfying, offering a balance of flavors from its various components. The tomato base provides a tangy backdrop, while the hot dogs or meat add a savory depth. The macaroni lends a comforting starchiness, ingredients, and the vegetables contribute both nutrition and textural variety. Its popularity during the recession stemmed from its ability to feed many mouths with minimal, inexpensive ingredients, while still providing a filling and somewhat nutritious meal. To prepare Hoover stew, one needs macaroni, canned tomatoes, hot dogs or any available meat, and canned vegetables. These ingredients are simply combined and simmered until the pasta is tender and the flavors have melded. This one-pot meal exemplified the era's need for efficient, economical cooking that could stretch limited resources to their fullest. Hoover stew might be versatile already, but for those who craved a different kind of versatility, come discover our next meal, a dish that somehow served as both a breakfast staple on its own and as a base for other delicious meal: cornmeal mush.
Cornmeal mush was a traditional breakfast in Appalachia for generations.
Cornmeal mush, a simple yet versatile dish, became a staple in many American households during the recession. This humble food, with roots tracing back to Native American cuisine, gained renewed importance as families sought affordable and filling meals during times of economic hardship. The name cornmeal mush straightforwardly describes its main ingredient and consistency, reflecting the no-frills approach to cooking necessitated by the era. Cornmeal mush was a smooth, thick porridge. When served hot, it has a creamy, slightly runny consistency that can be poured or spooned onto a plate. If allowed to cool and set, it becomes firm enough to slice, opening up additional serving possibilities. The appearance is simple and unassuming, but it has a golden yellow hue which lends a certain warmth and appeal. The taste of cornmeal mush is mild and comforting, with a subtle sweetness and slight graininess from the cornmeal. Its flavor serves as a blank canvas, easily enhanced with additions like milk, butter, syrup, or even savory toppings. The popularity of this dish during the recession stemmed from its affordability, versatility, and ability to fill empty stomachs. Cornmeal was inexpensive and had a long shelf life, making it an ideal staple for struggling families. To make cornmeal mush, one needs only cornmeal, water, and salt. The cornmeal is slowly whisked into boiling water and cooked until thick and smooth. This basic recipe could be served hot as a breakfast porridge, cooled and sliced for frying, or used as a base for other dishes. Its simplicity and adaptability made it a valuable resource in recession-era kitchens. Cornmeal mush might have lots of carbohydrates and little protein, but our next entry for you is a surprisingly meatless alternative that somehow still provided much-needed protein to struggling families: lentil loaf. Lentil loaf is a resourceful vegetarian dish that rose to prominence in American kitchens during the challenging years of the recession. This inventive meal gained popularity in the 1980s as a protein-rich, meatless alternative when animal proteins were scarce or too expensive for many families. The name lentil loaf aptly describes its main ingredient and shape, reflecting the straightforward approach to cooking that characterized the era. The taste of lentil loaf is hearty and savory, with a complexity that belies its humble ingredients. Lentils provide a mild, earthy flavor base, while vegetables and herbs add depth and aroma. The texture is firm yet tender, offering a satisfying mouthfeel that mimics meat-based dishes. To prepare lentil loaf, one needs lentils, vegetables such as onions and carrots, breadcrumbs, and basic seasonings. The lentils are cooked until tender, then combined with sautéed vegetables, breadcrumbs, and spices. This mixture is formed into a loaf shape and baked until firm. The resulting dish provided a nutritious, filling meal that could be sliced and served hot or cold, offering versatility in recession-era kitchens. And where protein like the lentil loaf wasn't readily available, our next meal shows you the lengths to which people went to secure protein in their diets, even turning to unconventional sources. Gopher stew.
Go figure. All right, let's get back and get our gopher stew on. Yeah, no, we're definitely just putting them in the stew pot. They like...
Not much there.
Yeah, not a lot there. But we smoked them up a bit and cooked them on the fire a little bit, so that way they'll be...
Gopher stew was a testament to the resourcefulness born of desperate times as it re-emerged as a survival food during the recession of the 1980s. This gamey, unusual dish gained notoriety in rural areas where conventional meat sources became scarce or unaffordable. The name gopher stew plainly describes its main ingredient: gophers, small burrowing rodents found abundantly in certain regions of North America. The taste of gopher stew is often described as gamey but mild, similar to rabbit or squirrel. The long cooking process helps tenderize the lean meat, while the addition of vegetables and seasonings creates a flavorful, comforting meal. Its popularity, or rather necessity, during the recession stemmed from the free and relatively abundant supply of Gophers in some areas, providing a crucial protein source for families struggling to put food on the table. To prepare Gopher stew, one needs Gopher meat, vegetables, and basic seasonings. The meat is typically cleaned, cut into small pieces, and simmered with vegetables and water or broth until tender. While not a common dish by choice, Gopher stew exemplifies the extreme measures some were forced to take during the economic hardships of the 1980s. Gopher stew might be a bit extreme, but our next meal for you is a simple yet filling sandwich that made use of a common and affordable ingredient: onion sandwiches.
History today from Handy Household Hints and Recipes of 1916. We're making the onion sandwich.
Onion sandwiches, a prime example of recession-era frugality, became a common meal for many Americans during the economic hardships of the 1980s. This simple dish gained prominence when more substantial sandwich fillings were scarce or unaffordable. The name onion sandwich straightforwardly describes its primary ingredient, reflecting the no-frills approach to food that characterized the era. The taste of an onion sandwich is bold and slightly pungent, with the sharp, slightly sweet flavor of raw onions dominating the palate. The bread serves to temper the intensity of the onions and provides a neutral backdrop. While not universally appealing, the strong flavor helped mask the blandness of other foods and provided a sense of substance to an otherwise meager meal. Its popularity during the recession stemmed from the wide availability and low cost of onions, which could add flavor and nutrition to the diet when other vegetables were scarce. To make an onion sandwich, one needs only bread and onions, with optional spreads if available. The onions are thinly sliced and layered between bread slices. This simple preparation required no cooking, making it an easy meal for those with limited resources or kitchen facilities. The onion sandwich is a comforting dish for sure, but up next is a meal that does it better by making use of two inexpensive staples to create a soothing meal: milk toast.
Here I show you super easy recipes to satisfy all your snacking needs. For today's snack, I'll be making you milk toast.
Milk toast, a comforting and economical dish, gained renewed popularity during the recession of the 1980s. This simple meal, with roots tracing back to early American cuisine, became a staple in many households when resources were scarce. The name milk toast aptly describes its two main ingredients, reflecting the straightforward nature of cooking during challenging times. The taste of milk toast is mild and comforting, with the warm milk softening the toast to create a smooth, easy-to-eat consistency. The flavor is primarily that of the milk, with the toast providing a subtle, toasty undertone. Any additional toppings like sugar or cinnamon can add sweetness or spice. Its popularity during the recession stemmed from its use of two readily available and relatively affordable ingredients, bread and milk, to create a filling meal that was easy on both the wallet and the stomach. To prepare milk toast, one needs only bread, milk, and a heat source. The bread is toasted, then placed in a bowl and covered with warm milk. This simple preparation made it accessible even to those with limited cooking skills or facilities. Milk toast was often served to the ill or elderly due to its soft texture and mild flavor. But during the recession, it became a common meal for people of all ages. And for those who found the milk toast a bit plain in flavor, our next meal is one that made use of an unconventional spread to add flavor to plain bread: ketchup sandwiches.
So come on, let me show you how I like to make my tomato sauce sandwich. Come on, let's go!
Ketchup sandwiches emerged as a makeshift meal during the recession of the 1980s. This ultra-simple dish gained notoriety when more substantial sandwich fillings were beyond the reach of many struggling families. The name ketchup sandwich plainly describes its contents, reflecting the bare-bones approach to food that characterized this challenging era. The taste of a ketchup sandwich is dominated by the sweet and tangy flavor of ketchup. The bread serves as a neutral backdrop, tempering the intensity of the condiment and providing some substance to the meal. While not particularly nutritious or satisfying by modern standards, the sandwich offered a burst of flavor in an otherwise bland diet. Its popularity, or perhaps more accurately, its prevalence, during the recession stemmed from the wide availability and relatively low cost of ketchup, which could be used to add flavor to the most basic of ingredients. To make a ketchup sandwich, one needs only bread and ketchup. The condiment is simply spread between two slices of bread. This elementary preparation required no cooking and minimal ingredients ingredients, making it accessible even to those with extremely limited resources. While not a preferred meal, ketchup sandwiches symbolize the lengths to which people went to create something resembling a proper dish during times of severe economic hardship. Ketchup sandwiches might have been great for flavor, but when it comes to getting enough calories, our next entry is a sandwich combination that might raise eyebrows today, but at the time offered a cheap source of calories. Peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwiches.
Today,
On Recipe Archaeology,
we are going to make peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwiches.
Peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwiches, an unlikely combination by today's standards, gained popularity during the recession of the 1980s. This unconventional pairing emerged as a way to create a filling meal from readily available, affordable ingredients. The name straightforwardly describes its contents, reflecting the practical approach to food necessitated by the economic hardships of the era. The taste of this sandwich is a unique blend of flavors. The rich, nutty sweetness of peanut butter combines with the tangy, creamy mayonnaise to create a complex flavor profile. The mayonnaise adds moisture and a slight acidity that cuts through the denseness of the peanut butter. While the combination might seem odd today, it provided a satisfying mix of protein, fat, and calories when other options were scarce. Its popularity during the recession stemmed from the relatively low cost and long shelf life of both peanut butter and mayonnaise. To prepare this sandwich, one needs bread, peanut butter, and mayonnaise. The spreads are simply layered between slices of bread, sometimes mixed together first for even distribution. This easy preparation made it accessible to anyone with these basic ingredients on hand. Unlike this one, our next meal wasn't famed for its easy prep, but it had an amazing saving grace in that it used an unexpected ingredient to stretch limited resources: oatmeal with lard.
Hello my friends, it's Danny, and today I'm showing you how to make the best oatmeal recipe ever.
Oatmeal with lard, a hearty breakfast option, gained prominence during the recession of the 1980s. This filling dish emerged as a way to add calories and sustenance to the commonly available and affordable oatmeal. The name plainly describes its two main ingredients, reflecting the straightforward, no-frills approach to cooking that characterized the era. The oatmeal's natural beige color is lightened by the addition of the white lard, creating a uniform, slightly glossy appearance. As the lard melts into the hot oatmeal, it leaves small, glistening pools on the surface. The texture appears smooth and rich, a stark contrast to the often watery oatmeal that many had to endure during these tough times. The taste of oatmeal with lard is surprisingly complex. The neutral, slightly nutty flavor of oatmeal is enriched by the lard, which adds a deep, savory note and a creamy mouthfeel. While the combination might seem unappetizing by today's standards, it provided much-needed fat and calories to diets that were often lacking in both. Its popularity during the recession stemmed from the affordability of oats and the availability of lard, which was often cheaper and more shelf-stable than butter. To prepare this dish, one needs oatmeal, water, and lard. The oatmeal is cooked in water, then a spoonful of lard is stirred in just before serving. This simple preparation provided a filling meal that could sustain workers through long, hard days. Oatmeal with lard was always a simple meal, but when craving luxuries like fruit pies that were simply unavailable, our next meal used vinegar to mimic them. Vinegar pie.
Today I'm going to be recreating one of my favorite dishes from Worth It, vinegar pie.
Vinegar pie rose to prominence during the recession of the 1980s. This unique dessert emerged as a substitute for fruit pies when fresh produce was unavailable or unaffordable. The name vinegar pie directly references its key flavoring ingredient, reflecting the resourcefulness of cooks during this challenging period. The taste of vinegar pie is surprisingly pleasant and complex. The vinegar provides a tangy, bright flavor reminiscent of citrus fruits, while sugar balances the acidity to create a sweet tart profile. The custard-like filling offers a creamy, smooth texture that contrasts nicely with the flaky crust. Its popularity during the recession stemmed from its ability to mimic more expensive fruit pies using pantry staples. The vinegar provided the acidic tang typically supplied by fruits, creating a satisfying dessert when fresh produce was out of reach. To make vinegar pie, one needs flour, sugar, eggs, vinegar, and basic spices like cinnamon or nutmeg. The filling is created by combining these ingredients and baking them in a pie crust until set. This clever dessert allowed families to enjoy a semblance of luxury during hard times, providing a sweet treat when traditional pies were impossible. Vinegar pie had a fruity taste, but our next entry had meat. Not just that, it did the impossible and found a way to stretch a small amount of meat to feed an entire family. Bologna casserole.
Today we're going to make a bologna casserole.
Bologna casserole, a thrifty and filling dish, gained popularity during the recession of the 1980s. This hearty meal emerged as a way to stretch small amounts of bologna, an affordable processed meat, into a satisfying family dinner. The name straightforwardly describes its main ingredient and preparation method, reflecting the practical approach to cooking necessitated by economic hardship. Bologna casserole is presented as a layered dish with a golden brown top. Slices of pink bologna are visible throughout, interspersed with noodles or potatoes, and held together by a creamy sauce. The casserole's surface often has a slightly crispy appearance from baking, with edges that bubble and brown. This homey comfort food look contrasts its origins as a make-do meal during tough times. The taste of Bologna casserole is savory and satisfying. The mild, slightly smoky flavor of bologna is enhanced by the creamy sauce, which often incorporates cheese for added richness. The noodles or potatoes provide a neutral base that helps to stretch the meat further. Its popularity during the recession stemmed from its ability to create a filling meal from relatively inexpensive ingredients, feeding a family with just a small amount of meat. To prepare bologna casserole, one needs bologna, noodles, or potatoes, a cream-based soup, often canned, and cheese if available. These ingredients are layered in a baking dish and baked until hot and bubbly. This simple preparation allowed even novice cooks to create a substantial meal with minimal ingredients and effort. The bologna casserole might have some meat in it, but our next entry is a far more protein-rich breakfast: Spam and eggs.
Guys, today I'm gonna make some spam-boiled eggs.
Spam and eggs, a protein-packed meal, rose to prominence during the latter part of the recession and gained further popularity during World War II. This hearty dish combined a newly introduced canned meat product with the classic breakfast staple, eggs. The name Spam and eggs plainly describes its two main components, reflecting the straightforward approach to cooking that characterized the era. Its popularity stemmed from Spam's affordability, long shelf life, and high protein content, making it an attractive option during times of economic hardship and rationing. To prepare Spam and eggs, one needs a can of, well, Spam and eggs. The Spam is typically sliced and fried until crispy, while the eggs are cooked to preference, scrambled, fried, or even made into an omelet with diced Spam. This simple preparation provided a filling meal that could be enjoyed at any time of day, offering much-needed protein during challenging times. Spam and eggs might have needed some actual ingredients, but check out our last meal that shows off the creativity of cooks who practically created something sweet from nothing at all: water pie.
Where it is water pie time. You heard me right. I am making a pie from water.
Water pie, perhaps the ultimate testament to recession-era ingenuity, emerged as a dessert option when traditional pie ingredients were scarce or unaffordable. This remarkably simple creation gained notoriety in the 1980s, showcasing the lengths to which people went to provide a sense of normalcy and small luxuries during dire economic times. The name water pie directly and somewhat incredulously describes its primary ingredient, reflecting the extreme measures taken to create desserts with severely limited resources. The taste of water pie is surprisingly sweet and pleasant, belying its humble origins. The flavor is reminiscent of a light caramel or butterscotch, with notes of vanilla. The texture is smooth and creamy, similar to a soft custard. Its popularity during the recession stemmed from its ability to create a satisfying dessert using only pantry staples, providing a much-needed touch of sweetness and comfort during challenging times. To make water pie, one needs only a few basic ingredients: water, sugar, flour, butter, and vanilla extract. These are combined in a pie crust and baked until set. This clever dessert exemplifies the creativity and resourcefulness born of necessity, allowing families to enjoy a simple treat even when traditional pie ingredients were out of reach. This brings us to the end of today's video, guys. Tell us, which one of these delicious, inexpensive meals caught your eyes? Is there any one of them you plan to try out, or one you think we might have missed? You're welcome to share it with us in the comments. Of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with all your friends. Bye for now.